Hi guys. Okay, so the purpose of this little talk is to help you try and find the frames in a traveling camera. Like all good animation, you should know where the action begins and the action ends. And of course, you should always know the breakdown points, where the key drawing should be, where the key animation should be. In this case, you're looking for a frame maybe where, give yourself some direction in the travel. Now, let's work with me on this. Let's pretend we're making for something for children's TV. Let's say we're going to teach the children how to count from 1, 2, and then what's after 2 kids? 3. So we could do that way. We could create this landscape, and here's a landscape that's interesting. Probably seen something like this in a kids program. If you're using traveling camera technique, it wouldn't be a bad idea to do a top bird's eye view of it as well. So this is like a bigger picture than we need. We don't need this big picture to go 1, 2, 3. In fact, we're probably going to go 1, 2, and then to 3. So 3 shouldn't be in the first frame. But it's very good to plan your landscape, to plan the world that you're going to travel through. And also wouldn't be any harm to do it from the top either. So 1 and 2 are together. So you can put 1 and 2 there. And 3 is over here. So a top view. I don't know if you can see that, or just notice that I've done it very small. But you can do a bird's eye view of it as well, where things would be on the ground if you were in a helicopter looking down. And this picture is much wider than we need. Okay, well, a conventional way of doing it would be this way. We could put the camera really up close, and we could go, there you are, kids, there's 1 and 2. What's next? And we pull out, and we get 3. Again, I can bring this up closer. So there's 1 and 2. That's a frame, right? That's a frame. And there's another frame. There's 1, 2, 3. So you notice we pull out in this case. And in this case, if this was a layout or storyboard or something like that, you'd put a line here with an arrow pointing that you're going, this is direct pull out. This is what they do in live action. If they're going to make a 1, 2, 3 model, and they just pull out. And they do it very, very incrementally, and be very even, easy to start with, and then even and pull out. And when you pull out, look, 3 would start coming in this way. 3 would start sliding in, and then you'd pull out to this wide shot. Right? That's another. Okay. Now you're noticing these frames would be all 12 field frames. So this is a 12 field frame, and this also is a 12 field frame. See, they're both 12 field. Right? However, on the page, this one looks smaller, but they're both 12 field. In fact, we know they're actually 7 field, because if we're hand rendering these, we don't want to be hand rendering 12 field. We want to hand render something much smaller, so we're going to work it around 7 field. People even go closer down into 5 field. Okay, so that's a pullout. That's a sort of a boring live action pullout. Got 1, 2, yeah, kids, 1, 2, where's 3? Oh, look, there's hiding in the back. So you just pull out and everybody's happy. But of course, we don't do that because we're not live action people. It's harder for us. So we decide, well, maybe we'll do a traveling camera. And maybe what we'll show first is this frame. Now, what do I mean by this frame? I'm not talking about the 2 here. What I'm talking about is, by the way, this is 7 field. It's actually square, so just work with me on this. We're talking about this. We want to show the picture 1 in its own, and we'd say, hey kids, look at 1. Now, you could say, well, where's the hell is 2? Well, we don't care about 2. We've put the camera in between 2 and 1. And that's what we can do in live action, in animation and traveling camera. You know, you can go through a keyhole. It's very, very hard to do that in live action. And anyway, you'd probably have to go into computer graphics, which are animated, but anyway. So basically, people don't do this because it's very, very difficult. So you can create a frame on its own like that. Again, this is 7 field, and we got a frame. Nobody cares about 2 because they haven't heard about it in the story. It's just like the way the convict came out of the side of the frame in Great Expectations, in that example I showed you in class. Okay, so our next frame then would be this frame. Because we pull out, just like the boring live action people did. Actually, this was their first frame. We pull out to this. and this looks like this. And you might notice immediately there's a difference. I've put a difference in the horizon. You might notice the horizon's only up here in the frame. There's a lot of sky there. And here there's less sky and more. Well, I can explain why that happens later, because what I'm trying not to do is doing a boring old live action pullout where everything is even and the sky and everything and the horizons and everything just pulls out evenly. What I'm trying to do is give it a touch of a curve. And why a curve? Because it's got more humanity to it. It's not a robot doing a pull out or a pair of tracks pulling out. It's got this lovely sensual kind of human touch to it that gives animation, of course, its specialness, and this type of traveling camera is special quality. So I'll come back to that again. Also, you notice the one has now shifted over a bit to the side, and the top of the one from here is, there's not that much difference actually, but you can see that there's certainly the mass of the one is bigger here because we're pulling away, and of course we're bringing in the two. So the two has to come in. So how do we do that? So what we have here set up in blue and red are the two frames we've just looked at. The two key frames that we're trying to work between here. The one and the two. And you can see the one is on its own, and the two has got one with it, and it's exactly the same. So now what we have to do is find an in-between of that. So these are the two keys, and we have to find a breakdown of those two keys, or an in-between of the breakdown. And the way we do that is we can join them up like this. And you might notice I'm trying to give it a bit of a curve, just to give it that human touch. Right, and then I work my way in. And this isn't scientific, guys. This is just a nudge to nudge you along. And by drawing in here, this way I can now see that the frame is picking up the bottom of the two. And I can see, because there's a bit of a curve, there's a bit of a twist in the horizon line. And so I end up with, so it's looking around desperately. Yeah, this one. Which is not the same as the final frame. It's coming in, and that two will be coming in like this. And as you're pulling out, you notice the two is much bigger now than it is in the final shot. It's much bigger. Here's the final shot with the one and the two in the red. Because we're going past the two, this two is even super close up. So it's going to get smaller as we pull out. So at this point it's quite big. And again, there's a different horizon. The horizon's again shifted a bit because of that curve. And you might notice, he says, that we've got three shapes of the one. So the one is very big, obviously, in the first one. And then it's got a lot smaller and shifted a bit. You might know it's gone quite high up. And now it's coming back down again off the horizon. It's coming back down here. And it's smallest. And that's the smallest it's going to be because we've fully pulled out here. Okay? So that's the three keys. That's the first one, that's the last one, and that's the in-between. And we find the in-between by going back to our world map, our worldscape that we had in the beginning, which has got the three in it, and it's wider than it needs to be, which is very important to know. And we just made a line between each of these frames, which are actually, they're not exactly 12. I just made squares here, but you should try and make them 7-field. And you find your middle frame. It's as simple as that. Now again, you could find the frame between here and one by going in here, But I won't do that because we'll start getting lots and lots of lines. And remember too that we're traveling towards 3. There's 1, 2, 3. So there's 3. So there's our two drawings for 3 that we're going to end up with. There's our first drawing where we started from. and then we start moving towards 3. And you can see the curves are much more pronounced here. And indeed, we sort of twist as we're going, and we tilt. Because this kind of camera movement likes to twist and tilt. So the in-between here I've done in blue. I don't know if you can see it. All we have there, we don't have any numbers. All we've got is the horizon, but you can see the horizon's at a tilt. That's because we're coming in and we're dropping down a bit. And you can see here that hopefully you can see here on this blue frame, that from here to here is it's about nearly a third, and this one is higher up. So the horizon line is higher up on this side, and it's lower on this side. Like in here, and like in here, like here and here. And likewise, by the time we get around to the tree is a little bit, it's not flat on, it's coming towards us a bit. Now, if you were to do this with live action, it'd just be a mess. But with animation, you can get the camera to do crazy stuff. So by joining up the corners, we can find our middle frames. That's what I'm trying to say. And indeed, you can go in deeper and find the next frame and the next frame and the next frame. And this becomes, you start off a little easy, because perhaps we hold at the 1, 2, and you end a little easy. You always want to stop these things easy. You don't want to stop them quick. And then you can pick up speed as it goes across. And you can find out how many frames, by counting these, how many frames you think you need to get from 1 to 2 to 3. And you can see it looks very like a chart, a timing chart. Some of you might not have done timing charts, but you can see I've got them slow here by having lots of little frames. Then the frames pick up as it charges across. And also, don't be worried that there's nothing great happening in this. This is quite a boring. If this was like yellow and blue, it'd be very boring. And it might be very boring for 6 or 7 frames. You'd notice that in the snowman when he's flying through the sky. That's all you've got is blue sky for maybe 40 frames. And if you're doing that one by one, you're saying, God, the audience will be bored. But they won't, because that's not even 2 seconds. And they're up in the sky and they're flying with a snowman. So the last thing they're going to be is bored. So what I'm trying to tell you here is don't panic, because a lot of good animators panic with this style. Because nothing's happening, or seemingly nothing's happening, or they can't find the frame properly. It doesn't matter, because if I looked at the snowman again, I can point you out where they make problems with the frames. And anyway, this is just a guide, so at some point you're going to have to wing it anyway. And then, of course, there's those people who are so talented that they just start off 1, find 2, and go off to 3, and they don't bother at all trying to plan it out, because they just trust their instincts, and they just keep drawing, and they draw, and they draw, and sure enough, they find 3. Because there is something about this style which is worth pointing out, that there isn't really great logic to it, there isn't any great science to it. You can plan it to a degree, but really, at the end of the day, you're jumping off a cliff, and you hope you land on your feet. And you know what? You more or less do, because as long as it keeps animating, as long as it keeps moving, nobody really minds too much. Okay, so probably need some questions, and you probably need some questions on that. So just to remind you, you're trying to find frames by framing off the 2 bits of action. You can do these extreme pieces first, just like you would with keys, and then you can find the in-between. And you can also time how many frames you need by a chart. And all the time you're giving yourself a little bit of a guide as to what things might look like as you're finding them. And this is a little bit more complicated. One thing I want to tell you about this is I put the 1 and 2 very close together, which isn't always, it's if you're shooting the snowman going over landscapes, that's really easy compared to this, because it's like just rolling hills coming towards you. Yeah, things get bigger as they come towards you and go off the side of the frame. This is a much tighter atmosphere. So this is more like as if you were shooting inside a room, which sometimes traveling cameras do. They might travel around a table. You might see a steaming teapot, and then you go to milk, and you might go through the handle of the milk jug, and then you arrive in a spoon, and then you spin around and show up a wide shot of the whole table with the teapot, the teacup, and the milk. So you can animate in very tight spaces with this, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Okay, we'll call that, and I'll take any questions if you need them.